Good evening, everyone. I'm Kathy Williams, your town planner, and we're here for the Route 6A Village Center Improvement Workshop. I think I've seen a lot of familiar faces out there, and thank you for coming out on a rainy evening. Back in 2019, we started some with VHB with some alternatives, and subsequent to that, we had some additional meetings and came to the conclusion that we really need to concentrate and take a look at the village center itself, and we had some real concerns with regard to pedestrian safety, the sidewalks, the crosswalks. You know, how do you get out of your driveways there, and the safety and the sight distance issues, and also just issues with speed within the village center itself. So we took all of that input, and we're continuing to work with VHB, and then we came up with some different concept designs that were presented to kind of a more of a core group of people in a November workshop meeting, which is really the business owners and the residents in the areas to try and get their input on some of the ideas that we came up with. A lot of great input. I think a lot of positive feedback at that particular workshop meeting, which was nice to see. The original in 2019, I don't think there was anywhere near as much consensus as we have now, so time does build consensus, hopefully. And we have use that information along with an additional meeting that we had with town staff to get their input, and VHB used all of that information to develop the concept plans that we're going to be reviewing this evening. And we're also looking to get a little bit more into the depth of the details with looking at things like sidewalk materials, whether decorative lighting we want, what type of decorative lighting that we want. So we really broadened out the workshop stakeholders in this meeting to try and get more people's input in that. And this evening there's also, in addition to myself, there's some other town staff. I see Jeff Colby, the DPW director. So as we get to the questions and answers, we may be peppering different town staff to answer some questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve Rhodes at VHB to go over the presentation.
Thank you, Kathy, and thanks everyone again for coming out. We're excited to show you guys these updated plans, and we're going to walk through kind of the images on the slides. We also have the plans printed at the back of the room, so during the Q&A portion or afterwards, we're happy to hang around and answer questions anyone might have on these current version of the plans. So a quick outline, we'll go over a recap of the project area, what the status is of the work, which Kathy just kind of touched on, the existing issues, goals, and objectives. What are our plans looking like at the moment? What are the next steps for taking the project forward? And then we'll open up to that question and answer session and take any feedback that anyone has on the plans. So the same project limits that we talked about in November, from North Sandy Side Lane to Minden Lane through the village. We're looking at improvements on north and south side of the roadway and to refresh the pavement surface of the roadway itself. We are at an updated ground survey that was done in 2023. So we're designing on very recent improvements that anyone's done to their frontage and the roadway itself. We had, as Kathy mentioned, the first round of the stakeholder input in November of last fall. And we were showing the concept plans, different iterations of those that we developed in the summer and fall of 2023. We now have a second round of conceptual improvement plans that was based on feedback from that meeting, and as Kathy mentioned, town staff input. So that's where we are tonight with round two. The issues are kind of put in a few buckets: pedestrian-centric, parking and access-centric, and safety-centric. So for pedestrians, there's a lack of definition on the sidewalks out there today. There's also some fairly wide driveways that people have to get across, as well as, non-compliant pedestrian curb ramps, sidewalk slopes, things like that can be corrected. From getting from one side of the street to the other perspective, there's a lack of crosswalks or substandard crosswalks that exist today that can be improved upon. There is an undefined number of on-street parking locations and also some signage that is sometimes not, is just kind of confusing the parking scenario, which we're going to look to correct with this project. And there's also a kind of lack of signage for getting vehicles, people looking to visit the businesses. There's some good existing parking lots behind the businesses, so we're looking to improve the definition of the direction to get people to some parking options as well through this project. The curb cuts or the driveways, some are too narrow, some are too wide. We'll try to get some consistency there. And then just looking at speeds. People drive pretty fast through here, as I think everybody knows. So that's one of the primary goals to improve the safety of the corridor by reducing vehicle speeds. That'll go hand in hand in improving pedestrian safety. And in general, the overall project goal is to have it kind of context sensitive. We want to recognize the character of the village with these improvements and not really change everything too drastically. So we're going to look at preserving the historic context, defining these parking locations, and adding some wayfinding signage to get people to these parking locations that are available today. The objectives for the design are to create a better defined, a real clear sidewalk improvement on both the north and south side of the road through the village. We want to also better define the driveway crossings. Minden Lane specifically is a fairly open expanse of asphalt, which we can make some improvements to. We want to reconstruct and or add crosswalks to get more locations for people on foot to cross the roadway to get to each side of the road. We want to provide some bump outs and or pavement markings to better define parking locations. This will kind of go hand in hand with better definition of driveway locations where the driveways tend to meet up against the parallel parking areas. We're going to also look at some streetscape amenities for the village. This could include lighting, which is currently on the concept plans. It could include some updates to benches or seating areas, things like that. All design elements to be determined and incorporated in the plans as we move forward. The signage plan that I mentioned on the last slide is something that we incorporate into this project design package. And then we're going to consider some driveway circulation changes. To some of the businesses, there's some one-way in, one-way out options that could be implemented that would kind of help define the vehicle flow of cars leaving and entering Route 6A. And then also looking at some interior connections between businesses potentially. That would be through kind of a agreement between property owners if it went forward. So just a quick recap of the November and December input we got on the plans. There was general support for making improvements to the village center. Everybody seemed to be on board with enhancing the crosswalk safety beyond just a standard line and stripe scenario. So we have a couple different options to show you tonight that we could incorporate into the plans. The general consensus to do something about Minden Lane to improve the safety and kind of definition of that area for pedestrians to get a safer crossing across there. There's a bunch of comments on making sure that emergency vehicles continue to have access through the corridor with these improvements that are made, which we took into account with the concept plan updates. And we also looked at a additional green strip on the north side of the road, thinking about how the town will maintain that or how the state would maintain that depending on the ownership status of the road as it goes forward. Looking at all the comments we had about the speed reductions we want to take into account through this area. And then some support for looking at the on-street parking on the north side of the road. So this is the project-wide view of the current concept plan. The next few slides kind of drill into a little bit more zoomed in detail of each one. In general, we'll kind of start with that because that's a little bit easier to see. So we're starting on the west end. The edge treatment that's currently proposed is an antique granite curb on the south side. So it would take what's there today and reset it to kind of a consistent reveal that's kind of been flattened out throughout the years. So rework that curbing. On the north side of the road, we're going to look at slopes granite edging, which is going to work with the grass pavers and that kind of emergency vehicle access for people to get off the road a little bit if there's ambulances coming through, or vice versa for fire trucks and ambulances to be able to pull up onto that area if they have a call to make right in the village center. The sidewalks are proposed to be reconstructed on both the north and south side of the roadway. The material for that is to be determined. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. The crosswalk on the left side of the photo here is there today and going to be improved for a shorter crossing distance. We can make some improvements there. We can also improve the signage for that crosswalk so people can see it better. And then we're also looking at, as we go from west to east, we're looking at lighting, pedestrian scale lighting that can be added to the corridor between kind of the bookends of the crosswalks at each end of the project. So this is the center on the north side or the top of the image. We can sort of see the parking area that's carved out with those parallel parking spaces. We also have the pull-off area, which is going to be kind of a concrete paver set off the roadway that grass can grow up through. So it'll kind of be a hybrid effect of a grass area and something that's stable enough to support vehicle traffic. On the south side, you have some definition to the shoulder area, which can create some parking spots. You also see those little dark circles near the driveways are the bump outs that we can create, which kind of define the end of the parking aisles. And then on the east end of the project area, we have Minden Lane and another crosswalk. So this crosswalk would be a new crosswalk that's not there today. So it would get people on each end of the project area the ability to cross the road. And on Minden Lane, we are proposing a level area. So we kind of like take the road edge elevation and put a different material than asphalt across that to define the pedestrian pathway to get from left to right or right to left across the parking spaces. So those head-in parking spaces to the two businesses, the Briar Patch and Barfields, and those would be retained. We're looking at ideas to install some signage to alert people to the fact that while they're parked head in, there may be people walking behind them when they go to back out, so be aware of that. Use your rear view camera, take a look before you go. There can be a crosswalk that can be added in kind of the what we're showing is kind of a narrow space of the actual Minden Lane itself between the parking spaces. So we can define where that crossing location is for pedestrians. And then that all kind of just ties in. The right side of the image just meets the existing sidewalk there. Some of the more finer level details, this is the parking bump out. What it does is extend the roadway grade toward the curb and just introduce a different material. So what we're thinking right now is that can be scored cement concrete just over this little kind of bulb shape area before the driveway. So that'll be something that will cue people, hey, don't drive over this. This is kind of the end of the parking area. It'll be up against the sidewalk on the right. And on the other side of the road, on the north side, this is what the grass pavers would look like. So again, you kind of have your edge treatment. This would be a new set slopes granite edging. It goes against the concrete pavers, which allow that grass to grow up right through them. That's a variable width. We're going to define that width mostly by setting the sidewalk alignment. It'll have some minimum width to it, but it'll be a variable width kind of pull-off area. Some of the crosswalk options. One on the left is called a rapid flashing beacon. It is a pedestrian called beacon, so it's not constantly flashing. So when someone walks up, there's different mechanisms. You can either automatically detect someone's there, or you can have people push a little push button at like a signal, and that'll flash. So cars will see it in both directions and alert a vehicle going by that there's someone there that wants to cross. It'll shut off after a predetermined amount of time. On the right is an edge lit flashing sign. Those are always on. There is, I think, some options for those to be called, but for the most part, the ones I've seen are those solar powered ones that just have a constant flash going. So it's not meant to be a flare level light. It's meant to kind of get people's attention a little bit and let them know yes, it is a crosswalk. Some of the pedestrian scale lighting options, you have many different styles that can be chosen from. We've selected kind of a sample here of some of the more historic looking lights, just feeling that fit in better with the context of the area. And they all have many options as to, what you can put on them between, hanging flower baskets, street signs can be attached to them. You can have the lights set on the top, on the right, and the left. You can have dual lights. There's many different options that we can look at here. Back down on the surface, these are some of the options we're considering for the sidewalk material. So this ranges from, many types of red brick through gray pavers. You can also do any material sidewalk with a a brick accent strip between the sidewalk and the edge treatment along the roadway. You can also have a traditional concrete sidewalk, like is shown in the image here with the grass on each side, or an asphalt sidewalk. That's from a recent project that we designed in Barnstable. These are some recently built examples of some material selections. So on the top left, you have a brick sidewalk on either side of the road. Those are kind of joined up with the cement concrete pedestrian curb ramp. So that would more often than not be recommended to stay as cement concrete just for better ADA accessibility, meeting their criteria for slopes, maximum slopes, and just maintenance in general is easier for those to be concrete. On the bottom right is a sample of the same project. This is in Dennisport, for anyone that might recognize it. Just looking the other direction of asphalt sidewalks with granite curbing and those kind of cement concrete ramps with some crosswalk details. We haven't talked too much about crosswalk striping yet, but there's options for that as well. It doesn't have to be standard white stripes. We can do some imprint surfaces and things like that that kind of define the crossing location.
Is that brick on the crosswalk?
That is not. That is a stamped asphalt treatment that can be colored to look like brick.
Okay.
So it's kind of a faux brick. The next few slides, we're going to get into some of the photo simulations of these improvements. So this is Route 6A today. We kind of layered on some of the options as we step through the slides. So this is, this slide and the next slide are kind of focusing on the two options, two of the three options we have for crosswalk signage. This one is showing a standard crosswalk sign, so there's no lights involved in it. It's just that fluorescent yellow sign for a pedestrian with the arrow pointing down at the crosswalk so vehicles can see that. Other improvements, we have the refreshed grass strip on the left side, the north side of the road. We have some lights that can be put in, to scale with pedestrian level lighting. Reconstructed sidewalk, again here just shown kind of as a concrete sidewalk. That's not decided yet. Refreshed roadway, striping, parking on the right. It's a little bit hard to see from this photo, but there would be parking on the left as you go a little bit further down the road. And then this version is all the same street improvements, just showing the option for what the kind of the height of the flashing beacon would look like for the crosswalk signage. So the flashing part is right between the two signs. As I mentioned, it gets seen in both directions, so people going east and people going west will see it when it gets called. And then going aerial, this is a look at the Minden Lane area today. And then layer in the improvements on that. We can see the new crosswalk that gets added just to the west of Minden Lane. We have the improvements that were kind of shown in that surface level simulation of the new sidewalk, grass strip, and the redefinition, I'll call it, of the crossing of Minden Lane. So this is what I meant when I said we could have a kind of separate material from asphalt to define the pedestrian crossing of the driveway and the roadway. So that would start at the edge of that driveway there, run across the head-in parking spots, have some striping to define a crosswalk there across Minden Lane itself, a little bit of channelizing striping so that people kind of have an idea of where their right or left side of their vehicle should line up with their parking, head in, and then that's it for the limb of this project right there at the left edge of the screen. Next steps, we're going to bring an update to Mass DOT on this project and kind of give them some ideas. But what we're thinking here for improvements to get their feedback, since it is right now their roadway, it's the state highway layout. We're looking at a potential third meeting for a select board update at a time to be determined. And then there will be one more public meeting, which we're thinking about scheduling after this stakeholder program concludes and any relevant updates are completed to the plans.
Do you have general timelines for those meetings?
I can pass that to Kathy just for some thoughts.
I think it kind of depends on what happens this evening and what kind of feedback we get. If we're on the right track and it doesn't take much to prepare for a select board meeting, we might be able to move directly to a Mass DOT meeting first, because I think the select board's going to want to know what Mass DOT has to say. And then we could move on to the select board meeting. So that could maybe happen in the next 3 months or something. And then if we get the select board on board, then we can make sure that we can have that final public hearing so that everyone's aware of kind of what we're proposing to do. I think we're just going to pass the mic around so that people don't have to get up, but we need to talk into the mic and identify yourself.
Thank you. Sarah Hinckley. I live in Yarmouthport. With all these changes, are you going to adjust the speed limit? Is that part of it?
I think one of the things that we have discussed with Mass DOT is they do have the ability to reduce the speed limits within a village center like this, but they want to see some physical improvements that would kind of like identify naturally to the kind of traffic calming measures for the people driving down the road. So I think what would be part of the discussions is if we say to Mass DOT, we're proposing to make these improvements to our village center, make it feel more like a pedestrian area, will you please reduce the speed limit? And they're more likely to do that. But reducing the speed limit or making that request is definitely part of the process.
Hi, my name is Ernie Barassa. I live on Vesper Lane, right near this area. I might be misinterpreting the diagram on page 2, but if I'm not, it looks like the westernmost boundary of the project is Sandyside Lane. And what I'm wondering about is, I'm sure you know that the Urology Associates of Cape Cod is shortly going to be moving into their newly renovated facility. That is a very busy, large urology practice, which I have to assume will considerably increase the traffic in the area. So my question is the project going to extend a little bit further west to encompass at least that building? And if not, how have you considered the impact of that practice moving in shortly?
Yeah, all good questions. Part of the urologist's plans are to do a bunch of improvements to their own driveway. There's 2 driveways to that property, and they're going to be consolidating it. And they also have some street trees and that type of vegetation that's going to be doing. So they're kind of improving a large part of that section anyway on the south side. Steve and I had discussed maybe continuing a little bit on the north side to get to at least Gingerbread, I think is the next street over, and get in front of the new Golden Jalapeno Tex-Mex, because there is, I think, even like a little bit of a drainage issue in front of there. So I don't know whether that's maybe something that we could also try and address that, or have Mass DOT address. Things like that are maintenance like that, they might be able to address, but the pretty are things that the town would have, I think at this point, have to address on our own if we want it to be done in a timely manner.
Thank you.
Hi, Cindy Ecker. I live on 152 Thatcher Shore Road. And I'm curious, with the addition of additional straight-in parking, a bike lane, and wider sidewalks, how much wider is that going to run into people's property in terms of taking grassy areas and trees down?
So there's no bike lane proposed as part of this project. The on-road lane widths would essentially be the travel lanes would essentially be the same width as they are today. And we would just add in the parking areas, potentially on the north side if that goes forward, and fit that in with some minor impacts at the back of the right-of-way. So that's something that has to be kind of brought to those property owners and discussed a little bit to get some content or consent or just general feedback on. But any work that happens at the back of the property would have to be kind of reviewed with any owners that would have those impacts before it goes forward. So there's, on this plan, I would say there's some properties that have impacts, but on the south side, for the most part, I think everything fits within the right-of-way, the public way. There's a few, I think just on the approach to Minden Lane, there's a few potential areas where we would need some space to put the sidewalk on private property because of the definition of the parking lane on the south side. It just needs a little bit more space than it has currently. So there's some scenarios like that, but that would all be kind of vetted out with the owners as the project goes forward to the next stage.
What about on the north side?
Same idea. On the north side, there'd be some impacts to put in the north side parallel parking. It'd have to be vetted out with those owners.
You have people directly opening the doors.
Can you use the mics so that we can hear you? Sorry.
Hi, John Stewart, Route 6A, Yarmouthport. On the north side parking, you have people opening their doors, and I really, into traffic, as when you're driving in from the west, people who are parking in front of the inner hole, for instance, their doors are in the traffic lane when they open their doors. On the north side there, you can't expect people to walk down to the next crosswalk. They're going to walk right across the street across the traffic. So if you insist on those spaces, you'd have to put a crosswalk there, I think.
Yeah. I don't think Mass DOT is going to allow us to do crosswalk,
Right.
crosswalk. I think the idea was to kind of bookend the village. It also is a function of, who's really going to, what business are these people going to be visiting? I think obviously Lighthouse Keepers is very, very busy, and I think a lot of those would be the stop, get out and go, and that's where so that was one of the things of thinking, with regard to putting the crosswalk in that particular location. One of the things that we do benefit on this particular section of Route 6A is we have a much wider right-of-way. I think if you go back one, it kind of goes up and out versus a large section of Route 6A only has a 40-foot wide layout, which makes it more difficult to include all the things that you were talking about with the roadways. We can't really put any bike lanes in, and it would be really difficult to put in fully handicap compliant sidewalks. Right now we have like these little narrow 3-foot, we really need to be 5-foot. And that was one of the things that we looked at in 2019, and when we started seeing all of the significant impacts that would be necessary in order to make that fully handicap accessible, people were a little bit concerned and didn't want to have a major impact to the kind of historic nature of the area. But in the village center, it's a little bit of a different feel. You can see here, we have the vertical granite curbing or the angled granite curbing, which may not be appropriate elsewhere on Route 6A, but it might be appropriate within a village center. It's certainly appropriate next to things like on-street parking, very typical.
Okay, my name's Charles Clark, owner of Hallett Store in Yarmouthport. Can you bring up the crosswalk that's in front of Hallett Store and the Tex-Mex there?
Yeah.
And I introduced at the last meeting that the crosswalk that you proposed there should be moved down and crossed in front of basically the medical doctor's facility and the bank. I talked to many of the people that are going to be doing that. Cars are going to be coming and going every 15 minutes. People are going to be traveling by either Uber or bus. They need a place to get off and get out and cross. Now, I did a proposal, and I gave it to you, and I photoshopped it in front of the bank. There is much more square footage in front of the bank to put a crosswalk. It's much more visible. It doesn't interfere with North Sunnyside, and it doesn't interfere with the Tex-Mex. Now, I did a survey in that area of when that crosswalk is used. And the only time that anybody uses it is early in the morning and late in the afternoon. And it's usually people going for a walk. They're just making a loop for exercise. It has nothing to do with business. It doesn't meet the criteria for a crosswalk because there is no high level of parking there. There will be in the banks and in the doctor's offices. There's going to be a lot of people in there. So that would be the ideal place to put it. And if you look at the layout, you have plenty of space to put there. And especially if you're doing a Christmas stroll and things like that, it'd be ideal if they're going to let us use the parking lot during the wintertime. And if any events that we show, that would be the location. And the other crosswalk makes more sense in front of either the Jack's entranceway or across from Design Works, because those parking spots is like what I think you indicated. They need to cross. And of course, that Inaho will attract those to be used. And they'll be parking there. Yeah, we know the layout of the road. Now, those bump outs that you indicated, if you saw what happened into Hyannis on Main Street when they added those, people lost their doors.
Why
Yeah,
would they
because
lose their doors?
people assumed that those bump outs were big enough when they opened their doors that they wouldn't be taken off. So,
Flush.
well, the problem is people park there and they'll show, and people will think that they can open their door and step out of the car clean and free, and they swing the door open to oncoming traffic and they lose their doors.
Oh.
It's an illusion. They think they're safe because of the bump out. And my question is, the road elevation over the multiple years has grown. drastically. Are we planning on lowering the grade of the road substantially when they add the surfaces? Yeah, because drainage is the problem for a lot of places.
I think maybe some of the drainage issues are the fact that you don't have any curb reveal, because normally the runoff would come off of the road.
You stand out in front of basically my building. The road is almost a foot higher than it was in the earlier days.
My understanding is that they didn't cold plane it, didn't take off that layer of material before they put overlays on it. They just kept putting it over and over. So it made
Well, that's my question is, are we going to grind the road down to meet the criteria?
I think that might be a question to ask Jeff Colby, DPW Director, whether that's something that's worth doing.
because, you know,
It might
I
be a
almost had
function
a-
of the grades that maybe a little bit can be done with a combination of, putting in the
It's going to
curb.
be flooding into people's driveways.
Yes, thank you, Jeff Colby, Public Works Director. It's honestly something I hadn't really considered. We're talking about fixing drainage issues and, installing additional drainage as necessary, but we can work with VHB and take a look to see if that adjustment will help. One of the challenges with the milling is you might have to carry that pretty far back. You can't do a very small area, because I'm sure when they overlaid this, they did most of Route 6A multiple times, and so you'd have to kind of chase it back to where it makes sense. So the additional work will need to be done to determine, where that's practical or if it's practical. I can't sit here today and say that. It sounds good, but we need to look at it in detail.
I think VHB does have the survey, the detailed survey, which will help in order to identify, to make sure that we aren't causing drainage problems on other people's property. And then maybe it might be a case where some of the roadway does need to be brought down a little bit. But I agree with Jeff. If it's the whole road, you have to bring it to a certain point and then kind of, feather it back in. And that, obviously is going to be a much bigger project and cost more money that we'd have to take into consideration.
Yeah, I agree. I think we can definitely look at it in the context of this project, though, of some, we're talking adjustments on this scale of inches rather than feet.
Well, I'd say you probably have to take about 6 inches out of
The curb stones that are there now are only,
Yeah.
you can only see like 2 inches of them.
it. If you can see that.
The curb stones are actually this tall.
Yep.
But they're 6 inches when it's set.
It's kind of a final design detail, but typically the way this will work in this kind of context of having these storefronts with access to the sidewalk is we'll start at that elevation and work out. Because sometimes over the sidewalks might have sunk over the years and created a slope from the step or the door down to the curb that's too steep, and we have to correct that. We have to make that flatter for ADA compliance. So that's usually our starting point. Just we don't like to try to make changes at people's doorsteps too much grade-wise. And that all kind of blends in with what the road elevation will be. It's something we look at kind of holistically. We're not going to just do one or the other. We're going to look at kind of all of it together.
Fred Ecker, Thatcher Shore Road. I'm curious how wide the sidewalk really is. I think you said 5 feet. Is that code? It has to be 5 feet?
Today, it's what, 3 to 4 feet
Yeah,
wide, maybe.
yeah.
What we want to have is 5 feet for a
I noticed in
consistent width.
Chatham recently, there's a sidewalks there they put in almost big enough to drive a car on. So. And secondly, do we really need flashing, blinking lights? Can we not do raised curbs like they have down in Barnstable? Humps?
So because this portion of the road is owned by the state, they would not allow a raised crosswalk in there. So that's also another consideration to kind of vet out with the emergency services as well. For a busy roadway,
So
it's something else
Barnstable
to consider.
did it. How come we couldn't then?
They took the road back.
So do we not rent the road back? No? We don't? Okay, all right. I'm curious.
Betty Lynn Tellett, Barfields, and to what Charlie was saying about the drainage, the road is so high now in front of where our building is, like looking today at the rain, watching the rain come in today, the water is literally sheeting off the road, going into Justin's parking lot and our parking lot, and then just like a torrent of it going down to the drainage there, to the point where if you go to walk across there to our front step, you're literally, today's rain, you're literally walking in ankle-deep water is how bad that drainage is from the road, because the road's so high and it slopes right down. So taking some of that road off and fixing some of that elevation is huge, because it just brings huge piles of all the debris and everything right in front of all the buildings.
Yeah, I think there'll be kind of an overall look at the drainage that goes along with these improvements, because what we're doing here is really putting kind of a hard edge where there hasn't been one before, where there's areas of just kind of gravel off the edge of the road. The water can flow off into that. So right away with that, we need to look at drainage. So it's going to be looked at once we kind of finalize on the features that we're going to incorporate into the final design. We'll look at all that.
Hi, I'm Lori Larson. I live at 256 Route 6A, so I'm a bit east of the village. I'm going to speak from my heart because Yarmouthport is instilled in my heart. And we're talking about all the things that we're going to be adding, but what are we taking away? Are we even taking one tree away? I want to know what we're taking, because we can't afford to lose any trees. And we're going to put in grass strips, but my experience is if you drive down Route 6A, there's not many grass strips that are very well maintained by anybody unless they really love their property and they're working on the front of it as well. So when I think of Yarmouthport, I think you look up charm in the dictionary and Route 6A is in there. And it's old and it's beautiful. And we're going to lose character with some of what's happening here. So it's really hard for me to digest. I agree that we need changes, but I think it's kind of a little bit over the top, to be honest. That's my feeling.
Melanie Barron, 111 Route 6A, just on the outside of the plans, but very close to the Urology Associates, and I would like to second that concern. I actually spoke to the staff there. They start to come to work at 6:30. They have 12 doctors, each has a technician, then there's a whole technical staff, then there is a scheduling staff, and then there is the money staff. So not having that taken into account by what's going on here, to me, is absolutely insane. I know I will never, ever be able to leave my house. I will never be able to get out of my driveway. I'm not saying you have to come to my house, too, but definitely, this isn't funny anymore that you're not including the urology people in your planning. Second thing is the crosswalks are absolutely horribly ugly. There is a crosswalk, and nobody crosses the street. The people, we don't walk, we're all driving. Nobody is walking across the street there. You are walking across the street. Okay, well, okay, I never saw anybody cross the street. But I would certainly say a flashing light for the nice people who want to cross the street is, in terms of what Laurie said, is crazy. I mean, it just doesn't work, in my opinion. I am the victim of having a tree taken down. I was 187 years old in front of my house. DPW did it. There was no way to stop them. The Urology Associates have already taken down a tree in front of the old Cape Cod consignment shop. So promising not to do it does not hold well with me, because Old Kings Highway didn't stop the DPW. Cemetery Department tried to stop the DPW. They did not have any respect for the fact that Yarmouth has an arborist on call that could have had something to do with killing a 187-year-old tree. I like the little baby lampposts. Nobody's talked about the lampposts. I like the short little one. If there's going to be a basket on it, who's going to change the flowers? Nobody even mows the grass in the grass strips. Who's going to put replacements in the baskets? And I would also like to, which I never realized before, I just walked through this area in the storm this afternoon, and I got soaked. I watched you. Thank you so much. I was dodging the cars because I had to go on the grass, and it was not just a little bit of water. It was a flood. So whatever you're talking about, I experienced today.
I saw it. You're gonna get
And you didn't come out and help me.
Sarah Hinckley again, Yarmouth Port. Just one comment about the crosswalks. They're very important. I grew up here. We rode our bicycles to Hallett's for a nickel for a glass of Coke. Kids today, I've been out there a number of times where kids are on their bikes or trying to cross and the cars don't stop, and somebody really has to jump out and wave at them to stop. And we should encourage walking. It's people come from all over in that area to go walking. So however you do it, it's really important for the kids too.
Hi, Susan Starkey, in Yarmouth Port, kind of right next to Just Picked. And one thing I'm really aware of is that we need to get this done. Kathy, you've been working on this for as long as I've been living here, which is almost 9 years, and we keep on not being able to move forward because we can't come together. So it's like there's got to be something within us that just says, we can do it. We can move forward. And I've got to tell you, my husband and I are getting ready to spend $2,200 to take down our absolute biggest, favoritist tree in our yard. And it breaks our heart, and I think I'm going to have like a pre-burial ceremony or something for it because it's so hard. But we've learned that if you've got a tree that's rotting on your property, even if it falls on Just Picked and takes out a bunch of cars and half their building, it's still our fault because it's an ailing tree. So as much as somebody else might want to just say, well, if it was a healthy tree falling because the winds will take them down, at least it's their problem. Well, no, it's not. For many, many reasons, it's our problem, and we don't get to just say that tree's only, I don't know, a maple doesn't last that long, so the tree's only as old as it is, but it's coming down. We're paying for it. Luckily, Eversource or DPW, whoever took down a tree right on 6A from us on the day that I was going to bury my mother, broke my heart, but it had to come down. Trees have a lifespan, just like we do. So I just really want to invite us to, every comment I've heard today has just been wonderful with ideas. We keep on needing to have improvements, like to where the crosswalks are and things like that, and what kind of light fixtures to have. So it's just wonderful, but I really want us to come together now.
Thank you.
Jason Bell, 152 6A. I have a clarifying question on this. So on the slide that you've got up, where it talks about the relocate mailbox, on the top right, north side. Yep. So that's my house. The north side has sloped curbs versus not sloped on the south side. And then with the pavers, I guess my paranoia would be, is that going to allow cars to just keep doing the really wide U-turn that they do today that typically, like I work from home, so it's sort of a quota each day of how many road rage or near accidents do I watch. Is that going to be prevented through this design, or is that still going to be possible?
It's something that the design will definitely aim to discourage. This sloped edging is not pleasant to drive up, especially if you're maybe a more aggressive driver, prone to do U-turns like that. You're probably going to be trying to do it fast. So just by the virtue of kind of the angle of it, it's not going to be a fun thing to just really whip around on quick. So that's part of the goal of choosing that. At the same time, we're trying to balance the access, right? So like we want to give people a chance to be able to slowly get off the road if there's an ambulance coming behind them, or if, like I said earlier, if a fire truck needs to park and make a call, be able to pull off the road and not stop traffic from kind of going through. So it's mountable, but it shouldn't be something that's just anyone wants to drive over. The other part is just the overall improvements to the village are kind of aiming to create more of like a sense of place and kind of redefine almost like a narrower like roadway area, not like narrowing the road, but just by nature of improving the edges, people should slow down. So we hope that that'll kind of help calm some of the driving behavior in general. Thank you.
David Young, Yarmouthport. A lot of great improvements proposed here. It's my first time seeing it, so congratulations to all those involved. A couple of comments, though. My experience is people have umbilical cords tied to their car, so that additional parking being proposed on the north side, they're not going to use the crosswalks that are at the east and west entrances. So at the risk of getting a smaller ice cream cone next time I go to Hallett's, I would suggest actually moving them closer together instead of farther apart, because that's where, and maybe even just do the one in the middle, but you go outside New England and people actually go to a crosswalk, they push the button, they wait to use it, cars slow down, they see that, and they get trained to use it. If these crosswalks are the end of the football field, either direction where you've proposed the new parking, they're never going to be used, except for the people who do that 1 mile loop every night. My other comment was, and maybe I missed it, but are you proposing speed monitoring signs on the east and west entrances into this area? If not, I would suggest that you consider that, because I think the one that was installed down by the post office has become very effective, particularly in slowing the traffic at the post office, Old Yarmouth Inn, and that whole curve. So that would help versus doing, speed bumps or something else, speed tables type of thing, or rough paving. So good job.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't believe this project incorporates any speed monitoring signs. I don't know if there's a separate program in town that's doing that, or.
I think the police have been able to get, I swear they got some money for some, so they might be able to get some additional money and have those installed kind of at either end. I know that, I thought they also had a portable one at some point where they would kind of move it around so people wouldn't get used to it, which is helpful as well. I think we're all shocked sometimes when we're driving and we see it, going, wait a minute, I didn't even realize I was going that fast. So it is effective.
Well, the thing that I've always noticed, this was a walking village. And if you've run a business as long as I did, years ago it was a walking village. There were no crosswalks. People could cross. The reason why is the area was so congested that nobody would go fast. So by creating the right buffer and the congestion would slow the traffic down, and it would allow people to get through there. Also, I propose that if you find a way to reroute the big truck traffic, and that was one of my proposals that I said is, if the truck traffic could go down Willow Street and get onto Buck Island, you would have a lot less traffic on this road. And that's the whole thing is, have a way to just keep the traffic for people who like this. People travel this road for one purpose only. It's scenic. They like it. It's written up in more travel guides than you can shake a stick at. When we change the characteristic of this road, people are going to hate it. It won't look like the pictures that are in my book. It won't look like the glass plate negatives that I own. It will look horrible if we change the characteristics. People come here for that purpose.
Can I just ask a question when you say change the characteristics? What specifically that's being proposed that you think would make it look bad?
Okay, when you change the curbing, and the respect is with colored and brick sidewalks and things like that, you're not going to keep those characteristics. If you look at the old glass plate slides, we didn't have fancy lampposts in the town. You proposed the clock in front of my store. It has nothing to do with this area. But there are a lot of things that do have to do with this area that you don't even propose.
Like?
Well, for one, this is called Hallett Street. And the idea is enhance that idea. We have the Hallett Banks house. We have Hallett store. Every other house was a Hallett. That would have been the thing to do, enhance that. I put the sign up across the street saying it was Hallett Street and Old Kings Highway. And the whole idea is people love that. But this is the whole thing is we're not keeping that part of the charm. If we pull back to what is going to happen is, like I said, move that crosswalk back. If you place that in the right position in front of the banks and the doctor's office, that will be a deterrent, and you can make a very wide paving area in a different color. Not change the aggregate, you know what I'm saying, the color. So when you approach that, you realize you're going to have to slow down. And that will trigger people's minds. Because I always said, put a little, X in the middle of the road, make it narrow until you get there, and then make it wider. But a colored strip on the road would be ideal for the crosswalk areas. Because once you approach it, you're going to slow down because you're going to notice the characteristics of the road has changed. So it's one of those things. People are impulse like that. I have seen that we are keeping some of the parking, but we're losing more than we're keeping. And proposal where the town crier is to add a parking lot. Now, if he builds the house where he wanted to build that parking lot, we're going to lose 2 more spots in Yarmouth. So the question is, he proposed a parking lot for that area to help take traffic and cars off the road, but the town didn't approve it. And that would have probably been well worthwhile to do it. But the whole idea is I propose that we should look at the idea for a long-term goal is to obtain the inner host property of that parking lot and include that in additional parking in the future.
I guess I'm hearing some conflict. I'm trying to figure out, well, what would I do after this meeting with some of the information that I'm receiving? That's why I'm asking very specific questions. And I guess we're kind of concentrating on the streetscape aspect of it. And is the feeling that this is too much?
Too modern. I think people want a good sidewalk they can walk on. I don't think they want something that has curb cuts and flowers and grass. They want a good sidewalk they can walk on.
I want that.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna look fabulous.
Yeah.
I'd like to speak to that. Okay, so Mashpee Commons is kind of like Vale, and Aspen is kind of like Yarmouthport. Okay, so Aspen is old and historic, and it doesn't look like Vale. Mashpee Commons, I'm getting like this feeling of Mashpee Commons here, and I just don't see that in historic Yarmouthport. That's my speaking to that.
So what I'm kind of hearing is like maybe we should scale it back so we're just addressing drainage and sidewalk issues?
Exactly.
This has been discussed for 15 years. This is ridiculous. Take the mic and speak.
So it sounds like we still are not going to come to 100% consensus, but it's a good conversation to hear what people have to say, so thank you.
John Stewart, and I live directly across the street from the pediatrician's office, right at the end. Our house is at the exact end of the east end, and I serve as the contractor architect on the Old Kings Highway, and this is a sign that we approved. I don't know if, did you get this?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. This could direct people to the parking that's available already off the road. I think it's something that we could agree on, and a different color than we normally allow would indicate what people would see it like this. The red, it's a reddish orange one we allowed at Taylorberry. And of course, that's off in the woods, but I'm sure I could get that passed on our board.
That had been part of the things even back in 2019, is I
Yes,
think
it
a
was.
lot of the people may not be fully aware of all of the large parking lots that are in the rear, so having
they're
a
not.
consistent parking and rear sign. So there are some parking in the rear, but something that's eye-catching, consistent, and is
Exactly.
intuitive for people to know that this is where the parking is.
That's
I
what I'm
agree.
suggesting.
Yep.
Exactly. I also have another question about what we're taking away. Does the width of the sidewalk necessarily have to be 5 feet? Because according to Mass Code of Massachusetts regulations, the minimum of 4 feet is a sidewalk. And if you have a passing area of 5 by 5 every 200 feet,
True.
right? So that would give you, it would move people further away from the traffic. That's why I suggest that. Right now, you're walking and the cars are brushing very close to you on that sidewalk. So if you could move, if you narrow the sidewalks, they're farther away from the traffic flow.
Do you mean to have grass strip?
Yes, and leave the grass strips, yeah. So we have a grass strip in front of our house that wasn't there when we moved in 40 years ago, but I dumped truckload after truckload of loam, and we maintain it ourselves. It takes 2 minutes for my wife to mow it. I'll leave you on that one.
It does take a village to maintain a village.
My name is Mark Link. I live on North Sandyside Lane. While I appreciate the perspective of different individuals, and I think everyone should be able to share their thoughts, I consider downtown to be very unsafe, to walk on sidewalks that are many places non-existent, to have curbs that may be 2 inches high, to have crosswalks that cars don't stop at when you try to cross it. I don't consider that beautiful. I don't consider that charming. We need to do upgrades. We need to update what we're looking at. Different people can have different perspective as to where the crosswalk should be, what type of lights we should have. I think those are all great discussions. I say let's move forward with this. This has been discussed for years and nothing has happened. I would leave it to the town to make the final decisions and just let's proceed to make this town center what it should be.
Jason Bell, 152 again. I guess one general comment and then one question. I can agree or disagree with a lot of people on some of the street stuff and don't have to, have my voice try and carry the day and can respect that. I think with the specific to the sidewalk type, right now when you look at, as you said, some of it's non-existent, there's some that's beaten up. I think something like the brick look would at least be an upgrade versus the current state, and I don't think we want to go back to just, having ruts or something like that, given some of the challenges of navigating the rain today. So I think something like that to me would seem to make sense. But one thing I was curious about that got touched on earlier, more just alluded to, was in terms of if we decided to do something around taking more advantage of some of the business parking. And so with a lot of the discussion and some of the points around the bigger vehicles and all of that, obviously that's not for the huge trucks and everything, but it is some attempt to try and alleviate the pressure. How might that move forward?
So as part of this project, I think it would come down to wayfinding signage and letting people know that it's there.
We're concentrating on the streetscape. I think the business owners are going to have to work together to maybe address some of those issues. I do know that back in the day, I think the Inaho parking lot and Jack's Outback had a connection to it. So maybe recreating that connection, maybe there needs to be some insurance policies and some agreements amongst the village businesses to say, okay, we want to use this parking for everybody and advocate it for being public parking. Because Inaho's not used during the day, but Jack's Outback is used all day.
Is there any money to pay Inaho? Because in the earlier days, the state had around $70,000.
You need to talk into the mic so everyone can hear you at home.
Yeah. In the day, Inaho would be a great access to a lot of people. And the question is, I did do a plan on it, and I did want to get a consensus on that. But the question is, it's a great avenue to pursue. Someday maybe Inaho wants to sell, get out, or maybe they'll just take a big chunk of change to use the parking lot. But the question is, the town has to take the initiative, because Jack's Outback is a condominium. We all know that. And 161's the condo that associates to it. Design Works only has one designated parking spot for their unit. Now, we know the town crier tried to move forward with more parking on theirs and tried to create more flow for more people to park, but it was denied flat out. A community only works if everybody has a place that can go. Now the houses on the basically north side are getting bigger, larger. Nobody's ever taken into account that they now have 4 or 5 cars in their parking lot. And the question is, and when they can't park there, they park on what very little parking that's left on 6A. But they just don't look at it as they need a place to go if they're going to bring their families down or friends. And if they could have a place to park out back for their cars or their boats or their skidoos or whatever, it makes sense to create some type of municipal parking for the area. So, you know, it's in my mind, it's a long-term thing down the road. But my question is, you got to start now because it'll come available and the town will drop the ball again.
Well, it's always hard for the town to procure anything. There's a whole process. There's a town meeting to vote the funds. And
the state gave the funds. And that, yes, yeah.
What state agency gave funds to buy private property?
Curiosus, when we had it, we had the whole meeting on it years ago. We had over 480 signatures. He came down here, spoke to the town. He had funding for off-street parking. And the question is, has anybody asked the state? Do they have funding for off-street parking?
Who was this at the state?
He was the director
Of what?
of the highway of
SDOT?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't know, maybe Jeff knows. I don't know anything about any funding like that that's available to Mass DOT.
83, remember what year it was?
I do. I even have the newspaper.
And he does.
Hi, Krishna Sprinkle, Route 6A. I agree with the man up front that just, you know, the little things, we're not going to all get what we want. I have preferences, but I'm not attached to those. But times have changed, and the traffic, I mean, I work out on the corner of 6A, and people go by me at like 45, 50, and I'm within like 3 feet of them. So I really am a little skeptical that the traffic is actually going to really slow down enough, but, you know, I guess that's what we can do unless we take the road. But I think that it's just important to realize how much things have changed. It's not like it used to be. Route 6A, I grew up here, used to be the way you'd go when you want to meander and have the scenic route. It's not like that. The village is ugly, in my opinion. It looks terrible. Really, it's almost embarrassing. You know, so I understand if we could restore it to the way it used to be, but I don't think that that's realistic in terms of the amount of traffic we have. It's just, I really would love to see us move forward with a plan and just everybody come together instead of having, you know, polarizing things that really are not serving anyone.
Hi, Greg Bilazikian, Lighthouse Keepers Pantry, Just Pick Gifts, and I live on Wharf Lane. The innkeepers aren't here, so I would just say, reiterate something that they said. You know, the innkeepers have a lot of people that come and stay at the inns, and they're not comfortable having their guests walk the village to go to now Leonessa, Old Yarmouth Inn. You know, we need to move something forward in this village to make improvements. The no parking signs that I may have been part of are really ugly, and I really don't like them, and I'd love them to go away. And anything we can do to make these improvements is important. The bridges are going to get redone. If you want to talk about infrastructure projects, we're going to have four new bridges that are going to come in the next 10 years. Sagamore will be first, and Bourne will be done later. That's a whole lot more traffic, a whole lot more people that all will come through and see Cape Cod. And we have to make them welcome. We have to make them feel comfortable. It's still a seasonal economy. We all rely on people to come here for that time of year. So if we don't do this project and we continue to kick the can down the road, we'll still be looking at each other with no parking signs, you know, sand on both sides of the street, and his wife will still be mowing the lawn in front of his strip of grass he built. So it is, you know, Mass DOT does have standards. VHB does a lot of good work with them, and I do applaud the town for moving this forward, knowing that this is a, you know, very rowdy crowd, if you will. But there is shortcomings on all of this, but not moving it forward really is a problem.
Justin Manning, 179 Route 6A. I just wanted to mention, Kathy, that we appreciate you guys listening to some of the commentary with regard to how the sidewalks are going to be created, because in front of our building, two things happen. One is it's the number one turnaround in the entire village, by far, aside from the bank. So that's fine. I mean, over the years, Jerry and I paved it a couple times and paid for it, and it gets beat up by big trucks that are lost, and that's fine, but it creates a safe turnaround. But more importantly, at Briar Patch, at least once a week, right out my window, I'll see an ambulance back up to grab a kid that's having respiratory issues to take him to Cape Cod Hospital. And so it would be nice if a sidewalk continued, and I think that the delineation of what you guys are going to do makes sense to be able to allow that to be safer. I do agree that we've got worried parents that come in and out of there with sick kids, maybe one's screaming in the back seat, one's in the front seat, like a little bit of distraction. So I do think that, you know, we'll definitely work with you guys on signage with regard to not having a worried parent with a screaming kid back into someone. I think that's an important thought here. But I do think that overall, you guys have kind of listened to everyone's concerns. There's historic concerns, there's safety concerns, there's speed concerns, and I think that, you know, just keep moving this along and not kick the can, but move it along. And I just want to tell you guys we appreciate, because if you hard curbed in front of us, that causes a whole new dynamic that could be, you know, detrimental to a number of things, you know. So thank you for that.
I just have a quick comment, which is there's signs for no parking, but people park right under the no parking sign. I have always wondered why there are no ticketing. Isn't there something that the town can do? I mean, if people thought they could get ticketed, maybe they wouldn't park there.
I think there's a whole history with regard to those no parking signs that Greg probably knows about better than I do. But I think there had been. It started with ticketing, with people parking on the sidewalks, and that kind of led to Mass DOT saying, well, we'll put some no parking signs, but then we need to put in some signs that say you can park here, but only for a certain time period. That's the other thing. This on-street parking is only supposed to be for a certain time period. It's not supposed to be someone parking there overnight or forever. So I think we're trying to be kinder and gentler until we can figure out what's going on. It's very disheartening to hear everyone say about how many things people are doing that are bad, like speeding through your community, parking where they're not supposed to be parking, motorcycles roaring through. I just wish we were all kinder and gentler to each other's in each other's neighborhoods when we're going through, so that some of these things wouldn't be an issue for us.
Last comment from me, sorry. There's underutilized parking on Summer Street at the church. I live across the street, and I'm sure that church needs money. And if the sidewalks were cleaned up and some traffic, some street lights, it would be a nice stroll from a little bit down Summer Street to go to dinner or coffee. I walk it every day, and it's not that far.
Does anyone else have any comments in the room? Because if not, maybe we'll see if there's anyone remote. Oh, we've lost people.
There's one. There is one hand up.
So maybe Dave, if there's a hand raised on the remote, if we could allow them to speak. Oh, it's Laurel.
Oh, sorry, I had one more comment, and I'm just curious why. I'm not trying to criticize the police force, but I don't see them ticketing speeders or ever stopping people that don't stop at crosswalks. I mean, I walk my dog every day, try to cross a crosswalk, and I stand there staring down the drivers, pointing at the crosswalk, and they drive right by.
Right.
I just wonder why there's no enforcement of that stuff.
Well, it's certainly something we can relay to them. I think obviously it's some of it, like the crosswalks, the police would have to be there at the time that it's happening. And hopefully if they're there, it wouldn't be happening. And it's unfortunate it doesn't happen all the time. But that's certainly something we can relay to the police chief.
Just in light of that, knowing their staffing shortages at the police station, they barely have enough policemen to attend the serious incidences they have. And not that it isn't, I have a business there, I would love to have, people slow down, but we can't, unless as a community, we give them more money and we give them more staff, then we're not gonna, the police are so stretched thin they can barely do what they're supposed to do right now. And, I have a lot of sympathy for that.
Karen Dowsett, I live in the Village on the north side, and I'm curious, is MassDOT on board with moving forward a plan that gets approved at the town level?
Well, I think that's kind of where we are, and we're trying to come up with some general consensus so that we have a plan that we feel like the community would back before we go to Mass DOT. I mean, obviously, VHB has worked significantly with Mass DOT on projects, so they have a good handle on things that would be allowed and not allowed. But we do need to go through them and get some input from them before we go to the select board.
Yeah, I'm just curious because back in 2012, we started a big campaign because of cars crashing into houses and the speed.
Right.
And in fact, the initiative was called Safety Over Speed. And we worked with the police department and the state rep, a couple of them, and the fire chief, and brought in MassDOT and really got everybody to the table to try and solve the safety. And in fact, it was your brother, Belzekian? Wasn't it your brother that almost got hit? It grazed his arm because I was at the court hearing for somebody who then crashed into one of the telephone poles. So at that time, we met with MassDOT, and they had no interest. Every single suggestion that we had.
I'd like to talk, but I'm waiting.
Sorry, Laurel, some other people here are chirping in. We'll get to you in just a minute. Thank you.
Okay.
Even simply repainting the crosswalk so people could see that there was a crosswalk there. No, there's a provision, we can't do that. It's a state highway, blah, 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 blah. So I'm hopeful. I continue to be hopeful about making improvements for the safety of our residents and whatever beautification really enhances and is mindful that we are a historic community and not turning it into a Mashpee Commons. I would not want to see that either. But it would break my heart to see us going through this again and then MassDOT saying, oh, sorry, we can't do it, or for whatever reason. So I'm just curious.
I do know, like back in the day, Mass DOT did do some things. I believe they replaced the signage at the crosswalks, which had been extremely faded, and put in signage. I think they put some of the chevrons at the corner at Summer. There's limited things that they can do within their maintenance funding that they have. This would be a project that we, as the town, would be bringing to them and probably funding through our funds, which is a little bit different. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. Thanks for clarifying.
I think we should let Laurel talk because she's remote.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I just want to say, nothing stays the same. Cars have gotten bigger, wider. Even my own car, I find it harder to get into parking spots because of the width. But every day I have to get out of my own driveway. And if Anaho has a full day on Thursday and Friday night, it's almost impossible to see, and inching out carefully to the street. I live at 165 next to Jack's, here in Jack's out back. So I'd like to say I am in favor of the improvements and making it safe for all of us to walk and to be able to get out of our driveways. So that's my thought. And I know there's others who don't want it to look like Mashpee Commons, but I also want to be sure that we are all safe. And that's the issues that I see. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurel. No, oh, I don't, and no, was that Laurel? No, we're all set on remote, thanks.
Hi, I'm Paul Orvis, and I used to live at 152. I currently live at 99 Route 6A. And in the 5 years that I lived at 152, I saw a lot. I'm generally in favor of all the moving forward, and everybody has to sacrifice. And we knew when we lived at that property at 152 that we were at risk of losing some things that we liked a lot, but that would be our sacrifice, and we were comfortable with that. I think at one of the previous meetings, the police spoke about that some ways that they could help with the on-street parking problems were to come by and do some spot enforcement, and just kind of come by and just be there for a month or two or however long they determined to deter people from parking there. And I think that strategy might work in the short term, but I think it's important to realize that there's really two sets of travelers here, and you're talking about being respectful of neighborhoods and things like that. Well, the people that live here year-round, it's a great message, and we should all be respectful of everybody's neighborhoods. But there's a whole bunch of people that come here, and nothing against them. They're our livelihood. They contribute to our economy, but they're coming here for the first time in many cases, and they're tooling along, off of Willow, which is a faster road, onto a straightaway that seems like it should be a faster thing to them, and then coming into an area where all of a sudden they see a sign for whatever they're looking for, and that's when I saw people braking and doing U-turns in the middle of the road and nearly running people over in wheelchairs, and we saw it all. And thankfully we only saw one accident in the time we were there, but I think that great, enforce the speeding, enforce the parking, do what you will, but recognize that only helps people like me and you all that live here all the time and know what's going on. To the uninducted, the signage is going to be much more important, and the access to strategic parking that makes sense to a new time traveler, I think, would be very beneficial to the community.
Just one plea for maybe next steps. I don't know the corner of Willow and 6A to get out of Willow Street. I don't know who you would talk to have a blinking anything, because the people are going to speed right out of Willow, just like was said, onto 6A. You can't see around that curve to your left. They already smashed that pole that's held together with an elastic band. That's not part of your purview, I understand, but I just thought it's almost going to ruin what you're planning if you've got people already experiencing a very difficult traffic situation. I wish there could just be a blinking light, something, anything, to stop the horror of that turn.
I don't know if there's ever been any signal analysis done at that intersection, Jeff?
Since 1970. Not when I moved there in 1970. There was never a signal on that corner. Just the only blinking light we had was down by the Summer Street.
You could put the horse trough back where they wanted the horses.
You could put that back too. Why don't you pull somebody else out of the archives and we can put that up too.
So kind of what I'm hearing today is maybe, what's the interest in having the flashing beacon at the crosswalks? Yeah. It's just to press a button. Press a button.
Yes.
Okay.
All the bike, wherever there's a bike lane, they have those flashes.
Pavement when you approach the crosswalk. A different color.
Like the school crossing?
Well, well, I was thinking of corrugated, but they didn't want to corrugate the road because that was against the standards of the road. But if you change the color of the asphalt when you approach the crosswalks, it would define the area, and they would be going, what were you approaching for,
I've seen
this going 40 miles an hour, he's not going to pay attention to a different color. They need to see a light.
Well, they aren't going to pay attention to a flashing light if they aren't going to pay attention to the different color of the road, because most people see what's in front of them, not what's on the side.
So Mass DOT would, in the scenario where the DOT maintains ownership, they would not allow a colored pavement They would allow something like this, with colored crosswalk. That's not standard white striping, but they wouldn't allow pavement coloration leading up to the crosswalk.
It's probably going to be consistent to what the bike people are seeing and through Dennis and all of the Outer Cape.
Yeah.
They're seeing those at all those intersections. They're having the flashing lights, and they're not so easy to see even when they're flashing. Because even if I don't drive like a maniac.
I think that's another good question is, have been showing the piano, which are the piano keys for the crosswalk, but are there some other options like this? This is slightly textured because it's the stamped, looks like stamped brick, but it can't be too stamped because you want to make sure it's ADA accessible and doesn't have too many bumps. So there's rules and regulations for all of that. But I always find that something visual in the pavement always helps me. And I think maybe, that's why having those fresh painted crosswalks are always very helpful as well. But this might be something that, I don't know whether this is something that, Jeff, the town would then need to maintain, because it's kind of like painted on the color. I mean, we have a couple of these already. I think it's at Forest Road, an old townhouse has that.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that it's safe to say that most of these special treatments, the state will look us towards the town of Yarmouth, have some kind of maintenance agreement or understanding with them. They're not going to want to, go the extra mile to maintain a lot of this. I don't know Steve, what your experience was in Dennisport, but I know that they are regularly looking, DOT is regularly looking for maintenance agreements with the town to maintain infrastructure that's not typical for them.
They did look for that in Dennisport maintenance agreement. Conversely, we're just wrapping up the design of a project in Brewster, Millstone Road, that intersects Route 6A, and the town wanted to put in a flashing beacon at the crosswalk. It's going to be a new crosswalk across 6A there at Millstone, and the state is actually taking ownership of that beacon there. So they're kind of mixed and matched what they're looking for towns to take on. But I think pretty consistently they would ask refreshing that crosswalk to be a town action. But they may, if we go forward with a flashing beacon, they may take ownership of that.
So does the colored make sense to people?
Yeah, especially if you have brick worked into the design. It kind of matches,
Yeah, getting back to the sidewalks, I mean, well, you can kind of see it here. I know that when we were talking about it in 2019, I think people were really kind of put off a little bit by the brightness of the color red. And I think there might be some other different, like, stones that or bricks that could be utilized that were softer. Would people, and we had shown a gray version, would people lean more towards the grays or the reds, or do we just want concrete? I think having asphalt, like they're showing there on the right, it's too much the same. The travel lane being asphalt and then the pedestrian lane, it's confusing. So I always like to have a different material. The basic, most easiest, obviously, and maintenance is like the concrete. I mean, I think that people understand that concrete is the pedestrian. So then it goes the next step of having the brick and or a strip of the brick, where you might have your decorative lighting, and then have the concrete. This starts getting a little bit more detailed and more elaborate, and is that something that people are a little concerned about where we're going?
I think if you ask 10 people, you might get 10 different answers.
Can we get?
The only comment I have on the concrete is, with the trees remaining in place that we can, the concrete is not forgiving. The asphalt actually allows for some flexibility so the roots can grow.
Well, it just pops up.
I've been driving over those stupid roots since I was 2 years old, so they're the same stupid roots. I'm sure you know them as well.
We need a mic so that we can hear your comment later.
These are good questions. It's very difficult to get consensus. I would defer to the town to make the appropriate decisions.
I would suggest, I've worked on Beacon Hill on restoration of some properties, and the Boston pavers are the Boston City Hall, the S&H, the Made in Bridgewater. They're uneven colors, different colors. It kind of breaks up the pattern.
Right.
They look nice, and I think, Kathy, I showed you the, on Beacon Hill, we had an argument for 17 years about the crosswalks. They're not just orange like the ones we have, the one we have now. You can get them in a brick color and set against a concrete for the people in wheelchairs or disabled people, they're very bright and very noticeable and easy access. So that would be my thoughts on that.
I do think that the feel of the village, things like on-street parking, things like pedestrian level lighting, lets people know that pedestrians are walking here. We have pedestrian level lighting. Having multiple crosswalks in a short particular area, these are all visual triggers to people that there's something different going on here. And I think that's what Mass DOT was talking about when advocating for reduction of the speed limit, saying, oh, you've made all these other improvements. One of the easiest things and the typical things to do for traffic calming is to narrow the pavement and narrow the roadway. But we've done that on 6A and people are still flying by. You know, you have a bunch of vertical elements right there, utility poles, trees, people are still going fast there. But if you totally change the feel of it and make it the village center feel, the idea was that that will naturally and intuitively make people slow down. I think with regard to the locations of the crosswalks, I think maybe we need to have a little more discussions with regard to the parking on the north side. We haven't talked to anybody. And if that's completely out, maybe it makes sense to keep the crosswalk in front of Lighthouse Keepers. But if that's a case where, no, that's something that could move forward, maybe it does make sense to move it down to get people, here's the parking, and then here's the crosswalk for people.
Because the parking in back of Anaho and parking in back of Jack's out back would be the accessible part. Plus, you have all the kids going to daycare in that area. And they usually drop the kids and they run. Yep. And of course, they might be using that area for the drop-off site. Yep. And you don't want them kids running across the street.
Yeah, if you go to Minden Lane where the crosswalk, one of the nice things about having the crosswalk there is I know that people were concerned in Minden Lane of getting out, because I know when people were parking in front of the Lighthouse Keepers, they couldn't see. So having that there and not having people park there was also a benefit to helping people get in and out of Minden Lane. So that was another consideration in locating it in this particular spot. But I think that was before we had started talking about reintroducing parking on the north side. So it's all good things to think about. And any comments on the decorative lighting? Nothing? Just short? Just short? Short is good? Okay.
Do it.
Okay. What I'd like to see is maybe the different businesses adopting, I mean, the business communities do it all the time, and they just kind of adopt that, I'm going to put something on this one and kind of go there. I know that there were some banner ideas that I don't think that quite made it through Old Kings Highway, but no, okay, that's interesting. No, so maybe less banners. Okay.
Just one quick thing about the maintenance of the grass strips and people saying that we don't take care of them. We try to. There's, when the mail people come, they use huge tire tracks when you're trying to, just try to maintain some grass there, and it's not easy. So I'm wondering how that would be with UPS and the post office and all of that in regard to the new design, if that would...
We put spikes in the... It's a very tough question because you have all the everyone who has a landscaping service that comes, they don't go into their driveway, they park on the side. People like the mails, UPS, all of those things. We all want our deliveries, we all want our Amazon packages. So I don't know a simple answer to that. I think that's why we were talking about maybe having some of those grassed pavers so it looks like grass, but then people can still mount up on top of them, but not making it an easy mountable like the asphalt ones, which are like really a sloop, very easy to mount. It's a little more uncomfortable, so not everyone's going to be doing that. Kind of that whole idea kind of came out of the Deputy Chief John Sawyer when he just retired, but he was saying that they like to be able to mount it and get there so the ambulance can get really close if they need to get into someone's property and park right there.
Brick instead of grass?
No, that actually has, they're like little concrete pavers that have an opening so you can plant them and the grass comes up. So when you're driving by, it'll look like grass. It won't look like a lush grass, but it'll look like grass, and then you can park on top of it.
On the north side parking, we're going to, we still need to have trucks park on 6A, and there's no other way around it. We need to have, everyone has a delivery, everyone has something, and the north side parking at least allows for that because the trucks do go both ways.
Yeah.
And we can't, I can't live without them, so.
I'm sorry, I think Laurel had a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm at 165 Main Street there, and I share my driveway. I have people that come into my driveway, and they're turning around. I have people drive down, and they're driving pretty fast. If I'm not careful, not looking, I can be run over and there, So I know that between Enaho and Jack's, there was they could go back and forth, in and out. But as all we know, 6A people have been driving faster. So what they do is also drive down these driveways faster. And it isn't safe for the residents that live there. So that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
But sometimes when you're looking about us sharing parking, there's always the concern for safety for ourselves and for the people, and how people drive today.
Yeah.
So I wanted to say.
Thank you. So all of us need to slow down. So I think we're going to have to kind of next steps, we might have to regroup a little and kind of talk about some of the comments we received tonight and see what kind of changes and maybe some more details we want to add in there, and then have that conversation with Mass DOT and then bring it to the select board. If you signed in and I have your email address, I'll send you an automatic, let you know what's going on and keep you informed. So thank you all very much for coming out.